The morning sun filtered through the hospital windows as Dr. Sarah Chun walked down the familiar hallway of the Veterans Medical Center. Her white coat rustled softly with each step, stethoscope draped around her neck like a badge of honor she'd earned through years of dedication to healing wounded warriors. At 32, she had already established herself as one of the most respected trauma surgeons in the facility, known for her steady hands and compassionate heart. Sarah had always been drawn to helping others. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, she watched her father struggle with injuries from his time as a factory worker. The family couldn't afford the best medical care, and she witnessed firsthand how proper treatment could change someone's life. That experience planted a seed that grew into her calling to become a doctor, specifically one who would serve those who had served their country. The Veterans Medical Center was a sprawling complex that housed hundreds of patients at any given time. Some were recent returnees from overseas deployments. Others were aging veterans from conflicts spanning decades. Sarah had seen it all: missing limbs, traumatic brain injuries, PTSD cases that broke her heart, and physical wounds that told stories of courage and sacrifice. Each patient was more than a medical case to her. They were heroes who deserved the very best care she could provide. As she made her rounds that Tuesday morning, Sarah noticed the usual activity buzzing around the trauma ward. Nurses moved efficiently between rooms. Orderlies transported patients for various procedures, and other doctors consulted on complex cases. The atmosphere was professional yet warm, a place where healing happened not just through medical intervention, but through human connection and understanding. Her first patient of the day was Marine Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, a 24-year-old who had lost his right leg below the knee in an IED explosion 3 months earlier. Mike was scheduled for a follow-up surgery to address some complications with his prosthetic fitting. As Sarah entered his room, she found him sitting up in bed, staring out the window with a distant look in his eyes. "Good morning, Mike," Sarah said with a gentle smile, pulling up a chair beside his bed. "How are you feeling today?" Mike turned to her, his young face bearing the weight of experiences far beyond his years. "Doc, I'm doing okay. Just thinking about home, you know? My wife's been sending me pictures of our little girl. She's starting to walk now, and I'm missing it all." Sarah's heart ached for him. She had seen countless soldiers struggle with the guilt of being away from their families during recovery. "You'll be home soon, Mike. Today's surgery should help get your prosthetic fitting properly, and then we can start the final phase of your rehabilitation." "I know, document. I trust you completely. You've been amazing through all of this." Mike's gratitude was evident in his voice. "I just sometimes wonder if I'll ever feel normal again, you know? If I'll be able to play catch with my daughter or take my wife dancing like we used to." Sarah placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Mike, I've seen soldiers overcome incredible challenges. Your determination and spirit are going to carry you through this. Yes, things will be different, but different doesn't mean less meaningful or less fulfilling. You're going to find new ways to be the father and husband you want to be." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Nurse Janet Williams poked her head in, her expression urgent but controlled. "Dr. Chun, we have an emergency incoming. Multiple casualties from a training accident at the local base. ETA 15 minutes. Sarah stood immediately, her mind already shifting into crisis mode. "Mike, we'll have to postpone your surgery until later today. I need to handle this emergency, but Dr. Patterson will check on you in the meantime." "Go save some lives, Doc," Mike said with a weak smile. "That's what you do best." Sarah hurried toward the emergency department, her mind racing through protocols and procedures. Training accidents were unfortunately common, and they often resulted in injuries that closely mimic combat wounds. As she approached the trauma bay, she could already hear the distant sound of helicopters approaching. The emergency department quickly transformed into a controlled chaos of preparation. Trauma teams assembled, supplies were checked and rechecked, and everyone fell into their well-rehearsed roles. Sarah had been through this dozens of times, but the adrenaline rush never diminished. Lives hung in the balance, and every second counted. The first helicopter touched down on the hospital's landing pad, followed quickly by a second. Through the windows, Sarah could see the medical crew already working on patients as they prepared for transport into the hospital. The automatic doors burst open as the first stretcher rolled in, accompanied by a team of paramedics rattling off vital signs and injury assessments. Male, approximately 22, blast injury to the abdomen, possible internal bleeding, BP dropping, needs immediate surgery, called out the lead paramedic as they transferred the patient to the trauma room. Sarah immediately took charge, her hands moving with practiced precision as she assessed the soldier's condition. Let's get him 2 or 3 immediately. Type and cross-match for 6 units and get surgical prep started now. As the first patient was rushed to surgery, the second stretcher arrived. This time, Sarah's attention was caught by something different about the injured soldier. As the paramedics transferred the patient, Sarah noticed it was a woman, her uniform torn and bloodied, her face partially obscured by medical equipment. Female soldier, early 20s, multiple shrapnel wounds, possible concussion, vitals are stable, but she's been in and out of consciousness, the paramedic reported. As Sarah began her assessment, something about the young woman seemed familiar, though she couldn't quite place it. The soldier's eyes fluttered open briefly, meeting Sarah's gaze before closing again. There was something in those eyes, a depth of experience that seemed incongruous with her apparent youth. "What's her name?" Sarah asked as she examined the shrapnel wounds on the soldier's arms and torso. "Corporal Lisa Brennan, according to her tags," replied Nurse Williams, checking the identification. Sarah worked methodically, cleaning and assessing each wound. Most were superficial, but a few required immediate attention. As she worked, she found herself studying the young woman's face more closely. There was something about her features, a particular scar on her left temple, that nagged at Sarah's memory. "Corporal Brennan, can you hear me?" Sarah asked, gently checking for signs of concussion. The soldier's eyes opened again, this time focusing more clearly on Sarah's face. For a moment, recognition flickered across her features, followed quickly by what appeared to be panic. Where am I?" Lisa asked, her voice hoarse and uncertain. "You're at the Veterans Medical Center. You were in a training accident. You're going to be fine, but I need to treat these wounds and make sure you don't have a serious head injury." Lisa tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. "I need to get back to my unit. They'll be worried about me. Your unit has been notified, and right now your job is to let us take care of you," Sarah said firmly but kindly. "These shrapnel wounds need proper treatment, and I want to run some tests to make sure your head injury isn't serious." As Sarah continued her examination, she noticed other details about the young corporal. Her hands bore calluses that suggested extensive weapons training, and there were several small scars on her arms that looked like they might be from previous injuries. Most telling, however, was the way she held herself even while injured, alert, cautious, constantly scanning her surroundings. "Corporal Brennan, how long have you been in the service?" Sarah asked, making conversation while she cleaned a particularly deep cut on the soldier's forearm. 3 years, Lisa replied, but something in her tone suggested there was more to the story. Sarah's instincts as both a doctor and someone who had treated countless combat veterans told her that this young woman had seen more than typical stateside training. There was a wariness in her eyes, a hypervigilance that Sarah had observed in soldiers who had experienced real combat situations. "Have you been deployed overseas?" Sarah asked gently, continuing her work. Lisa hesitated for a long moment before answering. "Yes, ma'am. Afghanistan. 2 tours." The pieces began falling into place in Sarah's mind. This wasn't just a training accident victim. This was a combat veteran who had likely seen significant action. Sarah's respect for the young woman increased immediately, but she also felt a growing concern. Combat veterans often carried invisible wounds alongside their physical injuries. "Thank you for your service, Corporal," Sarah said sincerely. "I've had the privilege of treating many soldiers who've served in Afghanistan. You're among heroes." Lisa's expression softened slightly, but Sarah could see the walls the young woman had built around herself. It was a common defense mechanism among soldiers who had experienced trauma, and Sarah understood it completely. As she finished treating the shrapnel wounds, Sarah made a decision that would prove significant. Corporal Brennan, I'd like to keep you overnight for observation, given your head injury. I also think it would be beneficial for you to speak with one of our counselors who specializes in helping returning veterans. I don't need counseling, Lisa replied quickly, her defensive barriers rising again. I just need to get patched up and return to duty. Sarah had heard this response countless times. Pride, duty, and the desire to appear strong often prevented soldiers from seeking the help they needed for psychological wounds. I understand your dedication to duty, Corporal, but taking care of your mental health is just as important as treating your physical injuries. It's not a sign of weakness. It's part of being a complete soldier. Lisa looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Sarah could see the internal struggle playing out across her features, the ingrained military discipline warring with the very human need for help and healing. Tell you what, Sarah continued, let's focus on getting your physical wounds properly treated first. We'll reassess everything tomorrow and see how you're feeling then. Fair enough. Lisa nodded reluctantly, and Sarah could see the exhaustion beginning to overtake her as the adrenaline from the accident wore off. The young woman's eyes grew heavy, and she seemed to be fighting to stay conscious. It's okay to rest, Corporal. You're safe here, Sarah said softly, adjusting the floor that would help manage her pain and ensure proper hydration. As Lisa drifted off to sleep, Sarah stood beside her bed for a moment, studying her young face. Something about this soldier continued to nag at her memory, but she couldn't quite grasp what it was. She made a mental note to review Lisa's medical records more thoroughly when she had a chance. The rest of the day passed in the typical blur of medical activity. Sarah successfully completed the surgery on the first soldier brought in from the training accident, and she checked on several other patients throughout the afternoon. Mike Rodriguez's surgery was rescheduled for the following morning, and Sarah spent time with him, reassuring his concerns about the delay. As evening approached, Sarah found herself drawn back to check on Corporal Brennan. The young woman was awake, staring at the ceiling with an expression that suggested her thoughts were far from the hospital room. "How are you feeling?" Sarah asked, entering the room and checking the monitors that tracked Lisa's vital signs. "Better, thank you," Lisa replied, though her tone remained guarded. "When can I return to my unit? Let's see how you feel tomorrow. Your wounds are healing well, but I'm still concerned about your head injury. You took a pretty significant blow, and concussions can be tricky." Sarah pulled up a chair, sensing that the young woman needed someone to talk to, even if she wouldn't admit it. "Can I ask you something, Corporal? What made you decide to join the military?" Lisa was quiet for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. Finally, she spoke. "My older brother was killed in Iraq when I was 16. I watched what it did to my family, how proud they were of his service, but also how devastated they were by his loss. I guess I wanted to honor his memory, to continue what he started." Sarah felt her heart tighten at the admission. "That's a beautiful way to honor your brother's memory. I'm sure he would be proud of your service." "I hope so," Lisa said quietly. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough, if I'm worthy of carrying on his legacy." "Corporal, from what I can see, you're an exceptional soldier. The fact that you've completed 2 tours in Afghanistan speaks to your courage and dedication. Your brother's legacy lives on through your service and through the lives you've undoubtedly saved." Lisa turned to look at Sarah directly for the first time since their conversation began. "Dr. Chun, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you become a military doctor? I mean, you could probably make a lot more money in private practice." Sarah smiled, appreciating the directness of the question. "Honestly, it's because of people like you. Soldiers who sacrifice so much for our freedom deserve the very best medical care. I can't serve on a battlefield, but I can serve those who do. Every soldier I help heal is my way of saying thank you for your service." The conversation was interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. Sarah excused herself and stepped outside to see what was happening. Nurse Williams was speaking with a man in military dress uniform, apparently a commanding officer who had come to check on the soldiers injured in the training accident. Dr. Chun, Nurse Williams called out, Lieutenant Colonel Matthews would like to speak with you about Corporal Brennan's condition. Sarah approached the officer, a distinguished-looking man in his 40s with the bearing of someone who had spent decades in military service. Lieutenant Colonel, I'm Dr. Sarah Chun, the attending physician for Corporal Brennan. Doctor, thank you for taking care of our soldier. How is Corporal Brennan doing? Her physical injuries are relatively minor, mostly superficial shrapnel wounds. My main concern is a potential concussion from the blast. I'd like to keep her for observation at least overnight, possibly longer depending on how she responds. Lieutenant-Colonel Matthews nodded approvingly. Doctor, I should mention that Corporal Brennan is one of our most decorated young soldiers. She's seen significant combat in Afghanistan and has been recommended for several commendations. She tends to downplay her injuries and push to return to duty quickly. This information confirmed Sarah's suspicions about Lisa's combat experience. I appreciate you letting me know. I'll make sure she gets the care she needs, regardless of her desire to return to duty quickly. There's something else, Doctor, the lieutenant colonel continued, lowering his voice. Corporal Brennan was involved in some classified operations during her deployments. She may be reluctant to discuss certain aspects of her service, but I wanted you to be aware in case it impacts her treatment or psychological evaluation. Sarah nodded, understanding the complexity this added to Lisa's care. Soldiers involved in classified operations often carried additional psychological burdens that were difficult to address through conventional means. As the lieutenant colonel left, Sarah returned to Lisa's room, her mind processing this new information. The young woman was still awake, though she appeared to be struggling with pain despite the medication. Everything okay? Lisa asked, noticing Sarah's thoughtful expression. Your commanding officer stopped by to check on you. He speaks very highly of your service record. Lisa's expression tightened slightly. Lieutenant Colonel Matthews is a good officer. He looks out for his soldiers. Sarah sat down again, sensing an opportunity to dig deeper. Corporal, I know this might be difficult to talk about, but sometimes physical injuries can bring up memories or feelings related to previous traumatic experiences. Have you been experiencing any flashbacks, nightmares, or anxiety since the accident today? The question seemed to hit Lisa like a physical blow. Her composure cracked slightly, and Sarah could see years of suppressed emotion threatening to surface. Dr. Chai, I appreciate your concern, but I've been through the standard post-deployment screenings. I'm fine. But Sarah could see that Lisa was anything but fine. The young woman's hands were trembling slightly, and her breathing had become more rapid. These were classic signs of someone struggling with trauma-related stress. Lisa, Sarah said, using her first name deliberately to create a more personal connection. What happens in this room stays between us. I'm not going to report anything to your command unless you're in immediate danger. Sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is admit when they need help. For a moment, it seemed like Lisa might open up. Her carefully constructed walls wavered, and Sarah could see the frightened, hurt young woman beneath the military facade. But then, as if remembering her training, Lisa's expression hardened again. Thank you, doctor, but I'm fine. I just need to rest and get back to my unit. Sarah recognized the dismissal, but wasn't ready to give up. She had seen too many soldiers suffer in silence, their invisible wounds growing worse over time. However, she also knew that pushing too hard could cause Lisa to retreat further into herself. All right, Corporal, get some rest. I'll check on you again in the morning. As Sarah left the room, she made a decision that would set in motion a series of events that would change both of their lives forever. She was going to find out more about Lisa Brennan's service record and make sure this brave young woman got the help she clearly needed, whether she wanted it or not. The evening shift at the hospital was typically quieter than the day shift, and Sarah used the relative calm to review Lisa's medical files more thoroughly. What she found painted a picture of a soldier who had experienced more combat than many veterans twice her age. Lisa had indeed served 2 tours in Afghanistan, but the details were more extensive than Sarah had initially realized. She had been involved in multiple firefights, had received a Purple Heart for wounds received in combat, and had been part of several operations that were heavily redacted in her file. The psychological evaluation reports were concerning, noting signs of hypervigilance, sleep disturbances, and emotional detachment, but Lisa had consistently denied problems and passed the minimum requirements for continued service. As Sarah read through the reports, a memory suddenly crystallized in her mind. She remembered where she had seen Lisa before, and the realization hit her like a thunderbolt. It had been 2 years earlier during a mass casualty event when multiple soldiers had been brought in from an overseas medical evacuation. Lisa had been one of the patients, but she had been unconscious for most of her stay and had been transferred to another facility before Sarah could follow up on her care. The previous injury had been serious, severe burns and shrapnel wounds from an IED explosion that had killed 3 members of her unit. Sarah remembered reading about the incident in the medical reports. Lisa had been the sole survivor of an ambush that had destroyed their convoy. She had managed a call for evacuation despite her injuries, and had been credited with saving the lives of 2 wounded soldiers from another vehicle that had been caught in the attack. Now, seeing Lisa again under these circumstances, Sarah began to understand the depth of trauma this young woman was carrying. She had survived multiple combat incidents, lost fellow soldiers, and continued to serve despite clear signs of psychological distress. The training accident today might have been relatively minor physically, but it could have triggered memories and emotions that Lisa had been suppressing for years. Sarah made another decision that night. Tomorrow, she would not only treat Lisa's physical wounds, but would also make a concerted effort to address her psychological needs, even if it meant challenging the young soldier's resistance to help. As she prepared to leave the hospital that evening, Sarah felt a familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She had dedicated her life to healing wounded warriors, and Lisa Brennan represented everything she had committed herself to protecting. This young woman had given so much in service to her country, and now it was Sarah's turn to serve her. The story of Lisa Brennan was far from over, and Sarah sensed that their paths crossing again was more than mere coincidence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for healing, and perhaps new revelations about the true cost of war and the strength of the human spirit. Walking to her car under the star-filled sky, Sarah said a silent prayer for all the soldiers who carried invisible wounds, and she promised herself that she would do everything in her power to help Lisa find the peace and healing she so desperately needed and deserved. The next morning arrived with the pale gray light that often preceded autumn storms. Dr. Sarah Chun arrived at the hospital earlier than usual, her mind still occupied with thoughts of Corporal Lisa Brennan and the revelations from the previous evening. She had spent much of the night researching trauma treatment protocols and reviewing the latest studies on combat-related PTSD, determined to find the best approach to help her patient. As Sarah made her way through the hospital corridors, she noticed the familiar rhythm of the morning shift beginning. Nurses were conducting their rounds, updating charts, and administering medications. The smell of coffee from the break room, mixed with the antiseptic scent that permeated every medical facility, creating an oddly comforting atmosphere for those who worked there daily. Her first stop was the trauma ward where Lisa was recovering. Sarah approached the room quietly, not wanting to wake her patient if she was still sleeping. Through the partially open door, she could see that Lisa was already awake, sitting up in bed and staring out the window with the same distant expression Sarah had noticed the day before. "Good morning, Corporal," Sarah said softly as she entered the room. "How did you sleep?" Lisa turned toward her, and Sarah immediately noticed the dark circles under her eyes and the tense set of her shoulders. It was clear that sleep had been elusive for the young soldier. "I slept fine, thank you," Lisa replied, though her appearance suggested otherwise. "When can I be discharged? I need to get back to my unit." Sarah had expected this question and had prepared her response carefully. I'd like to keep you for one more day of observation, especially given your head injury. I also want to run a few more tests to make sure everything is healing properly. Lisa's jaw tightened with obvious frustration. Dr. Chun, with all due respect, I feel fine. These wounds are minor, and I don't see why I need to stay here any longer than necessary. Corporal, I understand your eagerness to return to duty, but as your doctor, I have a responsibility to ensure you're completely ready before I clear you for active service. Sarah pulled up a chair beside the bed, signaling that she intended to have a longer conversation. Besides, I think we should talk about what happened during your previous deployments. The mention of her deployments caused Lisa's expression to shift noticeably. The carefully maintained composure she had worn like armor began to crack, revealing glimpses of the pain she had been carrying. I don't know what you mean, Lisa said, but her voice lacked conviction. Sarah opened the folder she had brought with her, containing copies of Lisa's military medical records. Lisa, I remembered where I had seen you before. You were here 2 years ago, after the convoy incident in Kandahar province. You were unconscious when you arrived, and you were transferred to another facility before I could follow up on your care. The color drained from Lisa's face as the memory Sarah was referencing became clear. Her hands began to tremble slightly, and she gripped the bed sheets as if anchoring herself against an invisible storm. That was a long time ago, Lisa said quietly. It's over and done with. Is it? Sarah asked gently. Because your medical records suggest that you've been struggling with sleep disturbances, hypervigilance, and emotional detachment since that incident. Yesterday's training accident might have brought back some of those memories. Lisa's breathing became more rapid, and Sarah could see the signs of rising anxiety. The young woman was clearly fighting an internal battle, torn between her military training to appear strong and her human need to process the trauma she had experienced. Dr. Chun, I appreciate your concern, but I've been through all the required screenings and evaluations. I passed them all. I'm fit for duty. Sarah leaned forward slightly, her voice taking on a more personal tone. Lisa, passing a screening and actually being okay are two different things. I've treated hundreds of soldiers over the years, and I've learned to recognize when someone is carrying wounds that go deeper than what shows up on x-rays or blood tests. I can do my job, Lisa insisted, but her voice was becoming strained. My unit depends on me. I can't let them down. And who's looking out for you? Sarah asked. Lisa, you've been carrying the weight of what happened to your unit for 2 years. You survived when 3 of your fellow soldiers didn't, and that kind of survivor's guilt can eat away at a person's soul if it's not properly addressed. The words hit Lisa like a physical blow. Tears began forming in her eyes, though she fought hard to contain them. Sarah could see that she was reaching the breaking point of the young soldier's carefully constructed defenses. I should have seen it coming, Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible. I was the point person. It was my job to watch for IEDs, to keep everyone safe. They died because I failed. Sarah's heart ached for the pain in Lisa's voice. She had heard similar confessions from countless soldiers who blamed themselves for the chaos and tragedy of combat situations that were beyond their control. Lisa, what happened to your unit was not your fault. IEDs are designed to be hidden, to cause maximum damage without warning. You did everything you could, and you saved lives that day by calling for evacuation despite your own injuries. But they're still dead, Lisa said, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. Rodriguez, Patterson, and Williams. They had families, wives, children. Rodriguez's daughter was just learning to walk when he deployed. Now she'll never remember her father. Sarah reached out and gently placed her hand on Lisa's arm. Their deaths are a tragedy, but they're not your responsibility. Sometimes terrible things happen in war that no one can prevent or control. The fact that you survived doesn't make you guilty of anything except being human. Lisa pulled her arm away, her defensive barriers slamming back into place. You don't understand. You weren't there. You didn't see what happened. You're right, I wasn't there, Sarah acknowledged. But I've been here in this hospital watching soldiers like you carry guilt and pain that isn't theirs to bear. I've seen what happens when those wounds are left untreated, and I care too much about you as a person and as a patient to let that happen. The room fell silent, except for the quiet sounds of Lisa's crying and the distant noise of hospital activity in the hallway. Sarah remained quiet, giving the young soldier time to process her emotions without feeling pressure to respond. After several minutes, Lisa wiped her eyes and looked directly at Sarah for the first time since their conversation had begun. "Dr. Chun, what do you want from me?" "I want you to let me help you," Sarah replied simply. "I want you to talk to our trauma counselor, Dr. Martinez. I want you to consider that healing isn't just about fixing broken bones and treating infections. Sometimes the most important healing happens when we address the wounds we can't see." Lisa was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with the decision. Finally, she spoke. "If I agree to talk to this counselor, will you clear me to return to my unit afterward?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Lisa, I can't make that promise without knowing what Dr. Martinez discovers during his evaluation. What I can promise is that I'll work with you and your command to find the best path forward for your health and your career." Before Lisa could respond, there was a soft knock on the door. Nurse Williams entered, carrying a small vase of flowers and wearing a warm smile. "Corporal Brennan, these just arrived for you," she said, placing the flowers on the bedside table. Lisa looked surprised. "Who are they from?" Nurse Williams handed her a small card. "According to the delivery person, they're from the soldiers in your unit." Lisa opened the card with trembling fingers and read aloud, "Brennan, get well soon. We're not the same without our guardian angel. Hurry back. Your squad." The message seemed to affect Lisa deeply. She stared at the card for a long time, and Sarah could see fresh tears forming in her eyes. "They call you their guardian angel?" Sarah asked gently. Lisa nodded, still looking at the card. "It's because I always volunteer for the most dangerous assignments. I figure if something's going to happen, it's better that it happens to me than to someone with a family waiting at home." Sarah felt her heart break a little more for this young woman who was so willing to sacrifice herself for others while believing she was somehow less worthy of protection and care. "Lisa, your squad cares about you. They want you to get well and come back to them, but they want you to come back whole. That means taking care of all of your wounds, not just the ones that show." Lisa set the card down and looked back at Sarah. "Dr. Chun, if I talk to this counselor, will you promise me something?" "What's that?" "Promise me that whatever we discuss won't go on my permanent record unless absolutely necessary. I need to know that seeking help won't end my career." Sarah understood the fear behind the request. Many soldiers avoided seeking mental health treatment because they worried it would limit their career opportunities or result in them being perceived as weak by their peers and superiors. "Lisa, I can promise you that Dr. Martinez follows strict confidentiality protocols. Nothing discussed in your sessions will go in your record unless you pose a danger to yourself or others, or unless you specifically request that certain information be shared. The goal is healing, not punishment." Lisa nodded slowly, seeming to make up her mind. "Okay, I'll talk to the counselor, but I want to be clear that this doesn't mean I'm admitting to having any serious problems. I just want to get back to my unit as quickly as possible." "Understood," Sarah replied, though she suspected that Lisa's perspective might change once she began working with Dr. Martinez. "I'll arrange for you to meet with him this afternoon." As Sarah prepared to leave the room to arrange the consultation, Lisa called out to her. "Dr. Chun, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Have you ever lost anyone close to you? I mean, really lost them, where you felt like it was your fault?" Sarah paused, considering how to answer. The question was clearly important to Lisa, and Sarah wanted to respond honestly while maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. "I've lost patients," Sarah said finally. "People I cared about, people I fought hard to save. And yes, I've questioned whether I could have done something different, whether their deaths were somehow my fault. How do you deal with it?" "I remind myself that death is sometimes beyond our control, no matter how skilled we are or how hard we try. I honor the people I've lost by continuing to fight for the people I can still help. And I remember that carrying guilt that isn't mine to bear doesn't honor their memory. It just prevents me from being fully present for the people who need me now. Lisa absorbed this answer thoughtfully. I never thought about it that way. Lisa, your fallen comrades wouldn't want you to carry guilt over their deaths. They would want you to live, to thrive, to find peace and happiness. Honoring their memory means taking care of yourself and allowing yourself to heal. After leaving Lisa's room, Sarah went directly to Dr. Martinez's office to arrange the consultation. Dr. Carlos Martinez was one of the hospital's most experienced trauma counselors, a former Marine who had turned to psychology after his own combat experiences. His unique combination of military background and professional training made him particularly effective at connecting with soldiers who were resistant to traditional therapy. "Sarah, good morning," Dr. Martinez said as she knocked on his office door. "What can I do for you?" Sarah explained Lisa's situation, sharing the relevant details about her combat history and current psychological state. Dr. Martinez listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions about specific symptoms or behaviors Sarah had observed. "She sounds like she's been carrying a heavy load for a long time," Dr. Martinez observed after Sarah had finished her summary. "The fact that she's agreed to talk with me is actually a very positive sign. Many soldiers in her situation would refuse any kind of psychological intervention. I'm hoping you can help her process what happened to her unit in Afghanistan," Sarah said. "She's clearly carrying tremendous guilt about being the sole survivor." Survivor's guilt is incredibly common among combat veterans, especially those who've lost close friends or unit members. The good news is that it's very treatable with the right approach. The key is helping her understand that surviving doesn't make her guilty of anything except being human. Dr. Martinez agreed to see Lisa that afternoon, and Sarah felt a sense of relief knowing that her patient would be in capable hands. However, she also knew that the real work was just beginning. Healing from psychological trauma was often a long and difficult process, requiring patience, commitment, and courage from both the patient and the treatment team. The rest of the morning passed quickly as Sarah attended to her other patients. She checked on Marine Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, whose surgery had been rescheduled for later that day. Mike was in good spirits, excited about the prospect of finally getting his prosthetic properly fitted. "Dr. Chun, I heard you have another soldier here from the training accident yesterday," Mike said as Sarah examined his leg. "How is she doing?" "She's going to be fine," Sarah replied, maintaining patient confidentiality while acknowledging Mike's concern for a fellow service member. It's always hard when soldiers get injured, even in training. "Yeah, we all know the risks, but it doesn't make it any easier when something actually happens," Mike agreed. "I hope she knows that we're all rooting for her recovery." Sarah was touched by the genuine concern Mike showed for a soldier he had never met. It was a reminder of the strong bonds that existed within the military community, bonds that extended beyond individual units or branches of service. Around lunchtime, Sarah returned to check on Lisa before her appointment with Dr. Martinez. She found the young soldier sitting up in bed, reading a book that appeared to be a military history text. "How are you feeling?" Sarah asked as she entered the room. "Nervous," Lisa admitted. "I keep thinking about what I'm going to say to this counselor. What if he thinks I'm crazy? What if he decides I'm not fit for duty?" "Lisa, Dr. Martinez is a former Marine. He's been where you've been, and he understands what you're going through. His job isn't to judge you or end your career. It's to help you process your experiences and develop healthy coping strategies." "What was his military background?" Lisa asked, clearly curious about the man she would soon be talking to. "He served 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan before transitioning to psychology. He specializes in treating combat-related trauma, and he's helped hundreds of soldiers work through similar experiences to yours." This information seemed to ease some of Lisa's anxiety. At least he'll understand what combat is actually like. That's exactly right. You won't have to explain military culture or combat situations to him. He gets it. Sarah spent a few more minutes talking with Lisa about what to expect from the counseling session, emphasizing that it was a safe space where she could speak honestly without fear of judgment or career consequences. When Dr. Martinez arrived to meet Lisa, Sarah introduced them and then excused herself to give them privacy. As she left the room, she caught a glimpse of Lisa's expression and was encouraged by what she saw. The young soldier looked nervous but determined, as if she was finally ready to face the demons she had been carrying for so long. The afternoon brought new challenges as Sarah dealt with a complex surgery and several emergency cases. However, her thoughts frequently returned to Lisa and the conversation that was taking place with Dr. Martinez. She hoped that this would be the beginning of real healing for the young soldier. Late in the afternoon, Dr. Martinez found Sarah in her office to debrief about his session with Lisa. "How'd it go?" Sarah asked, looking up from the patient files she had been reviewing. "Better than I expected," Dr. Martinez replied, taking a seat across from her desk. She's been carrying tremendous guilt about the convoy incident, but she's also incredibly strong and resilient. "I think with time and consistent therapy, she can work through this." "Did she open up about what happened?" "She told me about the explosion and losing her fellow soldiers. She also shared some experiences from her second deployment that I don't think she's ever talked about before. There's a lot of trauma there, but she's finally ready to start processing it." Sarah felt a wave of relief and hope. "What's your recommendation for her treatment?" "I'd like to continue working with her on a regular basis, maybe twice a week initially. I also think she should participate in our group therapy sessions for combat veterans. Sometimes hearing from other soldiers who've had similar experiences can be incredibly healing." "What about her return to duty?" Dr. Martinez considered the question carefully. "I think she needs some time to focus on her mental health before returning to an active combat unit. Maybe we can work with her command to find a temporary assignment that keeps her in the military, but in a less stressful environment while she works through her trauma." This was exactly what Sarah had hoped to hear. It represented a path forward that honored Lisa's desire to continue her military career while prioritizing her psychological well-being. "I'll reach out to Lieutenant Colonel Matthews to discuss the options," Sarah said. "I think if we present this as a way to make Lisa an even more effective soldier in the long run, her command will be supportive." As Dr. Martinez left her office, Sarah felt a sense of accomplishment and hope. They had taken the first steps toward helping Lisa heal from her invisible wounds, and while the road ahead would be challenging, she was confident that with the right support and treatment, the young soldier could find peace and continue her military career on stronger footing. That evening, as Sarah prepared to leave the hospital, she stopped by Lisa's room one final time. She found her patient sitting up in bed, looking more relaxed than she had since arriving at the hospital. "How was your session with Dr. Martinez?" Sarah asked. "Harder than I expected, but also kind of a relief," Lisa replied. "It felt good to finally talk about some of the things I've been carrying around." "I'm glad to hear that. Dr. Martinez thinks you're making good progress already." Lisa nodded, then looked directly at Sarah. "Dr. Chun, I want to thank you for not giving up on me. I know I was resistant to the idea of counseling, but I think you were right about needing to address more than just the physical wounds. Lisa, you've shown tremendous courage, not just in combat, but in being willing to face your trauma and work toward healing. That takes a special kind of strength." "I'm scared," Lisa admitted. "I'm scared of what else might come up in these therapy sessions, and I'm scared that I might not be the same soldier I was before." Sarah sat down beside the bed, choosing her words carefully. "Lisa, healing doesn't mean becoming someone different. It means becoming the best version of who you already are. You'll always be a warrior, but now you'll be a warrior who has faced her demons and won. That's going to make you stronger, not weaker." As Sarah left the hospital that night, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction and purpose. She had done more than treat Lisa's physical wounds. She had helped open the door to healing that could transform the young soldier's life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to serve those who had served their country. And Sarah looked forward to continuing her mission of healing wounded warriors, one patient at a time. The story of Lisa Brennan was far from over, but the foundation for her recovery had been established. With the support of Dr. Martinez, the understanding of her command, and her own remarkable resilience, she was beginning a journey that would lead not just to healing, but to a deeper understanding of her own strength and worth. 3 weeks had passed since Corporal Lisa Brennan's first counseling session with Dr. Martinez, and the transformation in her demeanor was remarkable. Dr. Sarah Chan observed these changes during Lisa's regular follow-up appointments, watching as the young soldier slowly began to shed the heavy armor of guilt and self-blame she had carried for so long. Lisa had been assigned to temporary administrative duties at the base while she continued her therapy, a compromise that allowed her to remain on active duty while focusing on her mental health recovery. Lieutenant Colonel Matthews had been surprisingly supportive of the arrangement, recognizing that a fully healed soldier would be far more valuable to his unit than one who was struggling with unresolved trauma. On this particular Thursday morning, Sarah found Lisa in the hospital's group therapy room, arriving early for the weekly session that Dr. Martinez facilitated for combat veterans. Lisa was reading a letter, and Sarah could see from her expression that it contained good news. "Good morning, Corporal," Sarah greeted her warmly. "You look like you received some positive correspondence." Lisa looked up with a genuine smile, the first one Sarah had seen from her since their initial meeting. "Dr. Chun, this is a letter from Rodriguez's widow, Maria. She wrote to thank me for calling for the evacuation after the convoy attack. She said she never blamed me for what happened, and she wanted me to know that she considers me family." Sarah felt her eyes moisten as she read the emotion in Lisa's face. This letter represented a crucial step in Lisa's healing process, providing external validation that contradicted the guilt narrative she had constructed about the incident. "That's wonderful, Lisa. How does it feel to read those words?" "It's strange," Lisa replied thoughtfully. "For 2 years, I've been so sure that the families of my fallen comrades blamed me for surviving when their loved ones didn't. This letter makes me realize that I might have been wrong about a lot of things." Sarah sat down beside Lisa, noting how different she appeared from the defensive, traumatized young woman who had been brought in 3 weeks earlier. The dark circles under her eyes had faded, her posture was more relaxed, and there was a quality of hopefulness about her that hadn't been present before. "Dr. Martinez tells me you've been making excellent progress in both individual and group therapy," Sarah observed. "How has the experience been for you?" Lisa considered the question carefully before responding. "Honestly, it's been harder than any combat mission I've ever been on. Facing your own fears and pain is terrifying in a way that enemy fire never was. But it's also been incredibly freeing. I'm starting to understand that surviving doesn't make me guilty of anything." Before Sarah could respond, other members of the therapy group began arriving. Sarah had occasionally observed these sessions, with the participants' permission, as part of her own education about treating combat trauma. Today's group consisted of 6 veterans from various conflicts, ranging in age from Lisa's 22 years to Vietnam veteran Robert Sullivan, who was 73. Dr. Martinez entered the room carrying his usual folder and coffee cup, greeting each participant warmly. His approach was informal and conversational, creating an atmosphere where soldiers felt comfortable sharing their most difficult experiences. "Good morning, everyone," Dr. Martinez began as the group settled into their chairs arranged in a circle. "I thought today we might focus on a topic that several of you brought up recently: the challenge of reintegrating with civilian life and dealing with people who don't understand military experiences." This introduction sparked immediate interest from the group members. Sarah noticed that Lisa leaned forward slightly, clearly engaged with the topic. "I'll start," said Jake Thompson, a 28-year-old Army veteran who had served in Iraq. "Yesterday, I was at the grocery store, and some lady saw my veteran's hat. She came up to me and said, 'Thank you for your service, but wasn't that war unnecessary?' I mean, how do you even respond to something like that?" Several group members nodded in understanding, and Sarah could see the frustration on their faces. This was clearly a common experience that many veterans faced when transitioning back to civilian life. "I get comments like that all the time," added Sandra Martinez, a former Air Force mechanic. People either treat you like a hero or like a victim, and neither one feels right. I just want to be treated like a normal person. Lisa had been quiet during this exchange, but Dr. Martinez gently encouraged her to share her perspective. Lisa, you mentioned struggling with how people react when they learn about your military service. What's that been like for you? Lisa was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. It's complicated because I look young, and I'm a woman, so people are often surprised when they learn I've been in combat. They either don't believe me, or they act like I'm some kind of anomaly. I had one person tell me that women shouldn't be in combat roles because we're too emotional to handle it. How did that make you feel? Dr. Martinez asked. Angry at first, Lisa replied. But then I realized that their opinion says more about their ignorance than it does about my capabilities. I know what I've done, what I've sacrificed, and what I'm capable of. I don't need their validation. Sarah was impressed by the maturity and self-awareness in Lisa's response. The young woman had clearly made significant progress in developing a healthier sense of self-worth that wasn't dependent on external validation. Robert Sullivan, the Vietnam veteran, spoke up next. Lisa, you're wise to recognize that at your age. It took me decades to learn that lesson. When I came back from Vietnam, the reception was different than what you younger veterans experience today. We were often treated with hostility or indifference. Mr. Sullivan, how did you cope with that? Lisa asked, showing genuine interest in learning from his experience. Honestly, I didn't cope well for a long time, Robert admitted. I drank too much, isolated myself from my family, and carried anger for years. It wasn't until I started coming to groups like this that I learned healthy ways to process my experiences. The conversation continued for another hour, with each participant sharing their struggles and insights about civilian reintegration. Sarah observed how the group dynamic provided a unique form of support that couldn't be replicated in individual therapy. These veterans understood each other's experiences in a way that civilians, no matter how well-meaning, simply couldn't. As the session concluded, Dr. Martinez announced that next week's topic would focus on post-traumatic growth, the concept that trauma, while painful, could also lead to positive psychological changes and personal development. I want everyone to think about ways that your military experiences, even the difficult ones, might have contributed to your strength, resilience, or wisdom, he said. We'll explore how trauma can become a source of growth rather than just something to overcome. After the group dispersed, Sarah walked with Lisa toward the hospital cafeteria. She had made a habit to check in with Lisa regularly, partly for medical reasons, but increasingly because she had developed a genuine fondness for the young soldier. How do you feel after today's session? Sarah asked as they selected their lunch items. Good, actually, Lisa replied. It helps to know that other veterans struggle with some of the same issues. I don't feel as alone as I used to. They found a quiet table near a window that overlooked the hospital's garden area. The autumn leaves were brilliant shades of red and gold, creating a peaceful backdrop for their conversation. Lisa, I've noticed significant changes in you over the past few weeks, Sarah observed. You seem more at peace, more confident. What do you think has been most helpful in your recovery process? Lisa took a bite of her sandwich while considering the question. I think the most important thing has been learning to separate what happened from who I am as a person. For 2 years, I defined myself by that convoy incident. I was the soldier who failed to protect her unit, the one who survived when others died. Now I'm beginning to see that what happened was a tragedy, but it doesn't define my worth as a person or as a soldier. That's a profound insight, Sarah said. It sounds like you're developing a healthier relationship with your past experiences. Dr. Martinez calls it reframing the narrative, Lisa explained. Instead of seeing myself as a failure, I'm learning to see myself as a survivor who did everything possible under impossible circumstances. Instead of focusing on what I couldn't control, I'm focusing on how I responded with courage and determination. Sarah was struck by the wisdom in Lisa's words. This young woman was not just healing from her trauma. She was developing insights that could help other veterans facing similar struggles. Have you given any thought to what you want to do when you return to active duty? Sarah asked. Lisa's expression grew thoughtful. Actually, I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I still want to serve, but I'm wondering if there might be ways to serve that also help other veterans. Maybe something that combines my military experience with what I'm learning about trauma recovery. That sounds like a wonderful direction to explore, Sarah encouraged. Your experiences could be incredibly valuable to other soldiers who are struggling with similar issues. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Martinez, who approached their table with a pleased expression. Lisa, I hope you don't mind the interruption, he said, but I wanted to follow up on something you mentioned in today's session. You talked about feeling angry when people question your combat role because you're a woman. I think that might be worth exploring further in our individual sessions. Lisa nodded. I'd like that. I think there's still some anger there that I haven't fully processed. Anger can be a healthy response to injustice or ignorance, Dr. Martinez explained. The key is learning how to channel it constructively rather than letting it consume you or turn inward. After Dr. Martinez left, Sarah and Lisa continued their conversation, eventually moving to the topic that had been weighing on Sarah's mind for several days. Lisa, I have something I want to discuss with you, Sarah began. I've been thinking about writing a case study about your recovery process, with your permission, of course. I think your story could help other medical professionals better understand how to treat combat trauma. Lisa looked surprised. You want to write about me? With all identifying information changed, of course, Sarah clarified. But I think your journey from trauma to healing could provide valuable insights for doctors who treat veterans. You've shown remarkable courage in facing your demons, and I believe your story could inspire others to seek the help they need. Lisa was quiet for several minutes, clearly considering the proposal carefully. Dr. Chun, if my story could help other veterans get better treatment, then I'm willing to participate. But I have one condition. What's that? I want to be involved in writing it. I want to make sure that it accurately represents what veterans go through and what kind of treatment actually helps. Sarah felt a surge of excitement at the proposal. Having Lisa as a collaborator would make the case study far more authentic and valuable than anything she could write alone. I think that's a brilliant idea, Sarah replied. Your perspective as a patient would be invaluable. Over the following weeks, Sarah and Lisa began working on the case study together. They met regularly to discuss Lisa's experiences, both the traumatic events she had endured and the journey through recovery. Lisa proved to be an articulate and insightful collaborator, able to describe complex emotional experiences in ways that will be meaningful to medical professionals. During one of their writing sessions, Lisa shared a realization that had emerged from her therapy work. Dr. Chun, I've been thinking about something Dr. Martinez said about post-traumatic growth, she began. I used to think that healing meant getting back to who I was before the convoy incident. But now I understand that I can never be that person again, and that's okay. The person I'm becoming is actually stronger and wiser than who I was before. Sarah looked up from her notes, recognizing the significance of what Lisa had just expressed. Can you elaborate on that? Before the trauma, I thought strength meant being invulnerable, never showing weakness or asking for help. Now I understand that real strength means being vulnerable enough to seek help when you need it, and being honest about your struggles. The convoy incident didn't make me weak. Hiding from its effects was what was making me weak. Sarah wrote down Lisa's words, knowing they would be powerful additions to their case study. This young woman had not just survived her trauma. She had grown from it in ways that would make her more effective as both a soldier and a human being. As October turned into November, Lisa's progress continued to accelerate. She had developed healthy coping strategies for dealing with memories and emotions related to her combat experiences. She was sleeping better, eating regularly, and engaging more fully with life around her. Most importantly, she had developed a support network that included not just her therapy group, but also friends from her unit who had been educated about trauma and recovery. One afternoon, as Sarah reviewed Lisa's latest psychological evaluation reports, she was struck by the remarkable transformation documented in the clinical notes. The young woman who had been brought in as a training accident victim had evolved into someone who was not just healed, but thriving. Dr. Martinez knocked on Sarah's office door, carrying a folder that Sarah recognized as containing Lisa's case files. "I have good news," he announced with a smile. "I think Lisa is ready to return to full active duty. Her PTSD symptoms have significantly diminished. She's developed excellent coping strategies, and her psychological evaluations are consistently positive." Sarah felt a mixture of joy and sadness at the news. Joy because it meant Lisa had successfully overcome her trauma, but sadness because it meant their regular interactions would soon end. "What type of assignment is she being considered for?" Sarah asked. "Actually, that's the interesting part," Dr. Martinez replied. "Lieutenant Colonel Matthews has proposed assigning her to a new program that provides peer support for soldiers returning from deployment. It would allow her to use her combat experience and her recovery journey to help other veterans." Sarah couldn't help but smile at this news. It was perfect, an assignment that honored Lisa's military skills while utilizing her hard-won wisdom about trauma and recovery. "Has Lisa agreed to the assignment?" "She's very excited about it," Dr. Martinez confirmed. "She sees it as a way to turn her painful experiences into something that can help others. She told me that if her trauma had to happen, at least now it can serve a positive purpose." That evening, Sarah stopped by the base where Lisa was completing her administrative duties to congratulate her on her impending return to full active duty. She found Lisa in the office she had been assigned, working on what appeared to be a training manual. "Congratulations," Sarah said as she entered the office. "Dr. Martinez tells me you're being cleared for full duty." Lisa looked up with a radiant smile. "Thank you, Dr. Chun. And thank you for everything you've done for me. I honestly don't know where I'd be without your intervention. You did the hard work, Lisa. I just helped open the door." Lisa gestured to the documents on her desk. "I'm working on a training manual for the peer support program. I want to make sure that other veterans know they're not alone and that getting help is a sign of strength, not weakness." Sarah looked at the pages Lisa had been writing, impressed by the clarity and compassion evident in every paragraph. This young woman had not just healed from her trauma, she had transformed it into a tool for helping others. "Lisa, I want you to know that watching your recovery has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my medical career," Sarah said. "You've shown that with the right support and tremendous personal courage, it's possible to not just survive trauma, but to grow from it." As Sarah prepared to leave, Lisa called out to her one final time. "Dr. Chun, I have something for you." She handed Sarah a small framed photograph showing Lisa with her therapy group, all of them smiling and looking healthy and strong. "We wanted you to have this," Lisa explained. "You helped save all of us in different ways, and we wanted you to know that your work matters." On the back of the frame, someone had written, "To Dr. Sarah Chun, thank you for seeing our invisible wounds and helping us heal. You're wounded warriors." As Sarah drove home that evening, she reflected on the journey she had shared with Lisa Brennan. The young soldier had arrived at the hospital as a training accident victim, carrying 2 years of unprocessed trauma. She was leaving as a healed warrior, ready to help others find their own path to recovery. It was exactly the kind of story that reminded Sarah why she had chosen to dedicate her life to serving those who serve their country. Every patient was a unique individual with their own struggles and strengths, but each one who found healing represented a victory not just for that person, but for everyone whose life they would touch going forward. Lisa Brennan's story was far from over, but this chapter, the chapter of healing and transformation, was concluding on a note of hope and purpose that would resonate far beyond the walls of the Veterans Medical Center. 6 months later, Dr. Sarah Chun stood in the auditorium of the Veterans Medical Center, watching as Corporal Lisa Brennan delivered a presentation to a room full of medical professionals, military officers, and fellow veterans. The transformation was so complete that Sarah sometimes had to remind herself that this confident, articulate young woman was the same person who had been brought into her emergency department as a traumatized training accident victim. "Trauma doesn't define us," Lisa was saying to the audience, her voice clear and strong. How we respond to trauma, how we heal from it, and how we use our experiences to help others. That's what defines us. Every veteran in this room has the potential not just to survive their wounds, but to transform them into sources of strength and wisdom. Sarah felt a profound sense of pride as she listened to Lisa speak. The case study they had written together had been published in the Journal of Military Medicine and was already being used in medical schools across the country to train future doctors in trauma-informed care for veterans. But more than that, Lisa herself had become a powerful advocate for mental health awareness in the military community. The peer support program Lisa had joined after her recovery had expanded from a small pilot project to a major initiative supported by military leadership at the highest levels. Lisa's combination of combat experience, personal recovery journey, and natural leadership abilities had made her an invaluable resource for other veterans struggling with similar challenges. As Lisa concluded her presentation and opened the floor for questions, Sarah reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought them all to this moment. It had begun with a training accident and a doctor's intuition that there was more to treat than visible wounds. It had continued through weeks of resistance, breakthrough moments in therapy, and the gradual reconstruction of a young woman's sense of self-worth and purpose. "Dr. Chun," a voice called out from beside her. Sarah turned to see Dr. Martinez approaching, wearing the satisfied expression of a therapist who had watched a patient not just heal, but thrive beyond all expectations. "Carlos, wonderful presentation," Sarah said, gesturing toward the stage where Lisa was now fielding questions from the audience with poise and expertise. "She's become quite the advocate," Dr. Martinez agreed. "Did you hear that she's been invited to speak at the Pentagon next month about military mental health initiatives?" Sarah was impressed, but not surprised. Lisa's story had resonated far beyond their small hospital, capturing the attention of military leaders who were increasingly recognizing the importance of addressing psychological wounds alongside physical ones. "How is she doing personally?" Sarah asked. "I know the speaking circuit can be emotionally demanding." "She's doing remarkably well," Dr. Martinez replied. "She still attends group therapy sessions, not as a patient now, but as a peer facilitator. She's learned to use her experiences as a source of strength rather than shame. Most importantly, she's developed a strong support system and healthy coping mechanisms." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of applause as Lisa finished answering questions. As the audience began to disperse, Sarah made her way toward the stage to congratulate Lisa on another successful presentation. "Dr. Chun," Lisa called out when she spotted Sarah approaching. "I was hoping you'd be here today." "I wouldn't have missed it," Sarah replied, embracing the young woman warmly. "That was an incredible presentation, Lisa. You're reaching so many people with your message." "It feels surreal sometimes," Lisa admitted. 2 years ago, I was convinced I was a failure as a soldier. Now I'm traveling around the country talking about resilience and recovery. Life has a strange way of working out." Sarah noticed that Lisa looked tired but fulfilled. The speaking engagements and peer support work were clearly demanding, but there was an energy and purpose about Lisa that spoke to the meaningful nature of her new mission. "How are things going with the peer support program?" Sarah asked as they walked toward the hospital's main lobby. "Better than we ever imagined," Lisa replied enthusiastically. "We've helped over 200 veterans in the past 6 months, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. Having someone who's been through similar experiences makes all the difference. Veterans trust other veterans in a way that's hard to replicate with civilian counselors, no matter how skilled they are." Sarah was gratified to hear about the program's success. It validated everything she had believed about the importance of peer support in the healing process. "What's next for you?" Sarah asked as they sat down in the hospital's garden area, a peaceful spot that had become one of their favorite places for conversation. Lisa's expression grew thoughtful. "Actually, I've been accepted to a college program that will allow me to earn a degree in psychology while continuing my military service." My goal is to become a licensed therapist who specializes in treating combat trauma. Lisa, that's wonderful, Sarah exclaimed. You'll make an incredible therapist. I figure I can do the most good by combining my personal experiences with professional training. There are too many veterans out there who are struggling in silence, just like I was. If I can help even a few of them find their way to healing, then everything I went through will have been worth it. Sarah was moved by the maturity and purpose evident in Lisa's words. The young woman had not just recovered from her trauma. She had found a way to transform it into a calling that would benefit countless others. Dr. Chun, can I tell you something? Lisa asked, her tone becoming more serious. Of course. I've been thinking a lot about that first day when you told me that healing meant addressing invisible wounds, not just physical ones. At the time, I thought you were being overly dramatic. Now I understand that you probably saved my life. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. Lisa, you saved your own life by having the courage to face your trauma and do the hard work of healing. I just helped point you in the right direction. But that's exactly my point, Lisa insisted. Sometimes all it takes is one person who refuses to give up on us, who sees our potential even when we can't see it ourselves. You were that person for me, and now I try to be that person for other veterans. They were interrupted by the arrival of a young soldier in uniform, who approached them hesitantly. "Excuse me," the soldier said nervously. "Are you Corporal Brennan? I attended your presentation today." Lisa stood and extended her hand warmly. "I am. What's your name?" "Private Rodriguez. Mom, I just wanted to thank you for sharing your story. I've been struggling since I got back from my deployment, but I've been too afraid to ask for help. Your presentation made me realize that getting help is actually the brave thing to do." Sarah watched as Lisa's face lit up with compassion and understanding. This was clearly not the first veteran who had approached Lisa after hearing her speak. "Private Rodriguez, would you be interested in attending one of our peer support groups?" Lisa asked. "We meet twice a week, and it's a safe space where veterans can share their experiences without judgment." "I like that very much, ma'am." Lisa pulled out a business card with the program's contact information. "And, Private, remember that seeking help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength and wisdom." As the young soldier walked away, Sarah could see the impact Lisa was having on individual lives. Each person she reached represented not just one life potentially saved or improved, but all the lives that person would touch in turn. "Moments like that make everything worthwhile," Lisa said, watching Private Rodriguez disappear into the hospital. "You found your calling," Sarah observed. "I think my calling found me," Lisa replied. "I used to think that surviving when my unit members died was some kind of cosmic mistake. Now I believe I survived so I could help other veterans find their way through their own darkness." As the afternoon wore on, Sarah and Lisa were joined by other members of the peer support team, including several veterans who had been helped by the program and had gone on to become peer counselors themselves. Sarah listened as they shared stories of recovery, growth, and transformation that echoed Lisa's own journey. One veteran, a former Navy SEAL named Marcus, talked about how the program had helped him address not just his combat trauma, but also his struggle with alcohol addiction. "Lisa showed me that I could use my experiences as a SEAL to help other veterans instead of drowning them in a bottle," he said. Another veteran, Maria, described how the group had helped her overcome the isolation she had felt as one of the few women in her combat unit. "For the first time since coming home, I felt understood and accepted," she explained. Sarah was struck by the ripple effect of healing that Lisa had helped create. Each person who found recovery through the peer support program went on to help others, creating an ever-expanding network of support and understanding within the veteran community. As the informal gathering began to wind down, Dr. Martinez joined them with an update on the program's expansion. "I just got word from headquarters," he announced. "Based on the success of our pilot program, similar initiatives are being launched at 15 other veterans medical centers across the country. They want Lisa to help train the peer counselors at each location." Lisa looked both excited and slightly overwhelmed by the news. "That's incredible, but also a huge responsibility. You're ready for it, Sarah assured her. You've developed the skills, experience, and wisdom needed to train others. More importantly, you've proven that recovery isn't just possible. It can lead to extraordinary growth and purpose. Later that evening, Sarah found herself in her office, writing in the journal she had kept throughout her medical career. She wrote about Lisa's presentation, about the young veterans who were finding hope and healing through the peer support program, and about the profound satisfaction that came from witnessing such transformative change. As she wrote, Sarah reflected on the broader implications of Lisa's story. It was a powerful reminder that healing was rarely a solitary endeavor. It required community, understanding, and the willingness of people to reach out to those who were struggling. Lisa had benefited from that kind of reaching out when Sarah had refused to accept her surface-level claims that she was fine. Now Lisa was extending that same compassion to countless other veterans. Sarah's reflection was interrupted by a soft knock on her office door. She looked up to see Lisa standing in the doorway, holding a wrapped package. "I hope you don't mind the interruption," Lisa said. "I wanted to give you something before I head back to base." Sarah invited Lisa in and accepted the package curiously. Inside, she found a beautifully bound book titled From Trauma to Triumph, a veteran's guide to healing and growth. "Lisa, did you write this?" Sarah asked, flipping through the pages and recognizing many of the insights and strategies that had emerged from Lisa's therapy and recovery process. "I did, with help from Dr. Martinez and input from all the veterans in our support groups," Lisa explained. "I wanted to create something that could reach veterans who might not have access to peer support programs or who are still hesitant to seek help." Sarah read the dedication page and felt her eyes fill with tears. To Dr. Sarah Chun, who saw the wounded warrior beneath the surface and refused to let her stay silent. And to all the veterans who are still fighting invisible battles, you are not alone, you're not broken, and you are worthy of healing. "Lisa, this is incredible," Sarah said, continuing to flip through the book. "This could help thousands of veterans." "That's the hope," Lisa replied. "We're working with several veterans organizations to distribute it widely, and there's talk of developing it into a mobile app that could reach even more people." As Sarah examined the book more closely, she was amazed by the depth of insight and practical wisdom it contained. Lisa had taken her personal journey from trauma to healing and transformed it into a comprehensive guide that could benefit veterans at all stages of their recovery process. "How does it feel to see your story become something that can help so many people?" Sarah asked. Lisa considered the question thoughtfully. "It feels like everything I went through finally makes sense. The convoy incident, the years of carrying guilt and shame, the struggle to admit I needed help, all of it led to this moment where I can use my experiences to help others. I wouldn't change anything that happened because it made me who I am today." Sarah was struck by the profound wisdom in Lisa's words. This young woman had not just survived her trauma. She had transformed it into a source of strength that was radiating outward to benefit countless others. As Lisa prepared to leave, she turned back to Sarah with one final thought. "Dr. Chun, I want you to know that every veteran I help, every life that gets touched by this work, they're all part of your legacy too. You started this chain of healing when you decided not to let me walk out of here carrying those invisible wounds. After